But let's get to Vice President Kamala Harris traveling to Arizona today, just 3 days after the state Supreme Court ruled an 1864 law criminalizing nearly all abortions can be enforced. While in Arizona, Harris expected to underscore the stakes of the 2024 election for abortion, health care, and reproductive freedom. The vice president also expected to emphasize Tuesday's ruling by Arizona's high court was made possible by Donald Trump. The campaign released some excerpts from her prepared remarks, including this, quote, "We all must understand who is to blame. It is the former president, Donald Trump. It is Donald Trump who, during his campaign in 2016, said women should be punished for seeking an abortion. Donald Trump," she goes on, "is the architect of this health care crisis, and that's not a fact he hides. In fact, he brags about it." Here's what a second Trump term looks like. More bans, more suffering, less freedom. But we are not going to let that happen. That's an advanced look at prepared remarks today in Arizona from Vice President Kamala Harris. And Joe, she's right. Just a couple of days ago, Donald Trump stood on that tarmac and said it was an incredible achievement to get rid of Roe, and saying, quote, "We did that." He's now living with the consequences.
Living with the consequences. Senatorial candidate also living with the consequences of what she said a couple of years ago, though she is trying to sound as moderate as humanly possible and picking up the phone, calling around people. But Carrie Lake, of course, going to be spending the rest of this campaign outrunning earlier comments. New York Times headline, Democrats hammer a simple attack on abortion. Donald Trump did this. And he did. And the consequences are absolutely terrible for women and also for Republican candidates.
Yeah, while Willie was bringing in this story, I wrote 4 words on my paper. Donald Trump did this. That is what that's the message. That's the message, and that's what the Biden campaign has said. And it's as simple and powerful. I think we're going to hear Donald Trump did this about a lot of issues as the year goes on, including those connected to assaults on the democracy on January 6th. But most powerful.
Well, and also Donald Trump, and we're going to be talking about this too. He's desperately trying to run away from all the times he said he wanted to do away with Obamacare.
Yes.
Now he's saying, oh, no, Obamacare. I forget what I said about John McCain going like this. Maybe I like Obamacare.
Yeah,
so he's flip-flopping. He just looks so weak and desperate right now.
A Truth Social video yesterday, he tried to say, no, I'm for Obamacare. I just want to change it. And we can fact check like about 1,000 times he said he wanted to overturn it. Donald Trump did this. And as much as the Biden administration knows they have to put forward a positive message, so much of what they're going to say between now and November is like, look, this is what Trump did. He has changed your life. He has taken away your freedoms. He's threatening to do more. We can't have this again. And Donald Trump did this, is, Adrian, squarely going to be about abortion. And the vice president, who is this administration's best messenger on this issue, heads to Arizona, which is now trying to enforce a Civil War-era near total ban on the procedure, very much putting a battleground state, but one that seemed like it was slipping away from the president, now firmly up for grabs again. Tell us a little more about about that message we'll hear from the vice president. Donald Trump did this. Is that going to work?
Yeah, look, I think sometimes, Lemire, the simplest words are the most effective message. So I think you're going to see the campaign really playing out. Not only Donald Trump did this on abortion, but as Joe was saying, on a number of other issues. But look, the vice president is an incredibly effective messenger on protecting a woman's right to choose, to make her own decisions, not only about her own health care, but her own financial decisions, her own economic decisions. So I think obviously you're going to see the vice president continue to travel across the country. But I'm also very proud of the campaign and the White House for getting on top of this, for going to Arizona immediately, which of course meant that the vice president had to sort of change around her schedule. But they jumped on top of this because there is so much at stake. Arizona, of course, is a top battleground state in this campaign cycle. And, the campaign narrowly won Arizona in 2020. It's going to be a very close race this time around. But they want to make sure that every single voter, the vice president wants to make sure that every single voter, the entire American electorate, is squarely aware of who is responsible for this decision, for putting 3 Supreme Court justices on the court that were against a woman's right to choose, that made it very clear before they joined the court where they stood on this issue. And then, like you said, Donald Trump is flip-flopping around. He can't really figure out what the right message is right now. He's not going to be able to run away from what he did. And this campaign is not going to let them forget this.
Mr. Trump is a con man. He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair and to lie about it to his wife, which I did. Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. And I did that too, without bothering to consider whether that was improper, much less whether it was the right thing to do or how would it impact me, my family, or the public. And I am going to jail in part because of my decision to help Mr. Trump hide that payment from the American people before they voted a few days later.
That is Donald Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, testifying before the House Oversight Committee in February of 2019 and taking responsibility for the things he did on behalf of Donald Trump. NBC News has learned Cohen is on the list of witnesses expected to be called to testify in the former president's hush money criminal trial, with jury selection set to begin on Monday in New York. Cohen, you'll remember, pleaded guilty in 2018 to campaign finance charges related to hush money payments made to two women just before the 2016 election, including adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Joining us now is legal advisor to Michael Cohen, Lanny Davis, and state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg. Good morning to you both. Lanny, let me start with you. Can you confirm that Michael Cohen will be a witness in this trial?
Yes.
He will be a witness in this trial. So we should remind people that Michael Cohen went to jail for over a year for charges related to this. He served home confinement for another year and a half or so, almost 3 years of time served. So as you look at this, Lanny, what is this trial about exactly? We've got some distance from it, about 8 years since these payments were made in October of 2016, just before Election Day. What is this a trial about, the way you see it?
Well, let me quote Donald Trump's Justice Department's prosecutors in public when they made the charge that Donald Trump, and they wrote this, directed Michael Cohen to pay this money to Ms. Daniels. They said this case is about the impairment of democracy by allowing wealthy people such as Mr. Trump to buy silence a few days before the election to prevent the American people from gaining information they need. They describe this case as about democracy. That's the Federal District of New York, Southern District of New York prosecutors in a public document, hiding in plain sight. So every time someone describes this in a disparaging way as about sex or something else, quote Donald Trump's prosecutors describing this case as seriously about the undermining of democracy.
Lanny, can Alvin Bragg in a state court in New York make that connection? Can he go beyond the narrower violations of falsifying business records and how that became a felony? Can he go beyond that to make the connection to the election?
Not so narrow. He has charged Mr. Trump 34 felony counts, and those involve 34 times that he booked as expenses for legal services what federal prosecutors working for his administration described as payments to silence somebody right before an election, which made them illegal. So the answer is yes, he can connect the federal violation of fraud to New York State crimes, at least 3 of them, and he laid them out in the indictment. But yes, Eugene, that is definitely part of the case.
So, Dave Ehrenberg, you're a prosecutor, and we can already figure out what the Trump defense is going to be about Michael Cohen. They're going to paint him as an untrustworthy witness. They're going to say he pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. They're going to say you shouldn't believe a word this man says. So how do you then, as the prosecution, how do you use Cohen effectively with that as the backdrop?
Yeah, Jonathan, the reason why Michael Cohen went to prison for lying and for other felonies was because he was lying for Donald Trump. And it was, as Lanny said, for the felonies that are at issue here. So he's going to try to attack Michael Cohen, but Cohen will have corroboration. That's key for prosecutors. Corroboration in the form of Stormy Daniels herself and even perhaps Hope Hicks, a loyalist to Donald Trump, including David Pecker, the head of the former National Enquirer. Also, I think that Trump will try to use the John Edwards defense, which is these payments were not for campaign reasons. They were to protect his family. But that can be easily debunked. You know, he's going to try to say, I was trying to protect Melania from finding out. But Cohen and Stormy Daniels' lawyer first spoke about this affair in 2011. So this was known for years within Team Trump, and yet no money changed hands until 2 weeks before the election. So that is really damaging. Plus, as far as falsification of business records, why do that if you're just trying to protect the information from Melania? Melania was not likely to pour over the books of the Trump Organization, which is a private company. So why falsify these internal records just to keep it secret from her, unless you knew it was a campaign election crime? But also, Trump allegedly directed Michael Cohen to delay paying Stormy Daniels until after the election because he didn't want to pay her at all. And after the election, it wouldn't matter. Why? Because Trump knew this was about the campaign. So there are a lot of good facts for the prosecution. And in the end, I think this is headed towards a conviction.
You've seen some of the names, Dave Ehrenberg, on the prosecution, possible witness list for the prosecution. Is there anybody in particular you would call that you'd be interested in their testimony?
Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks gave some different testimony when she appeared before Congress, Joe. And I'm interested in seeing what she says now. She did testify before the grand jury, and she is a Trump loyalist. She was the one who was like steaming his pants on Air Force One, and now she's going to be there to corroborate Michael Cohen, and we'll see what happens there, but that'll be a powerful witness. Trump will try to bring in politics in this, trying to say that Joe Biden is behind this, but the judge is not going to allow this to become a circus. And besides, I must add, as a state prosecutor, the thought that Joe Biden is somehow involved in this is ridiculous. I can tell you in 12 years as a state prosecutor here, I've never gotten a call from the White House about any case. It's not how it works. And for those who think, well, that's Manhattan and he wouldn't call here, remember, in my jurisdiction in Palm Beach County, I oversee Mar-a-Lago. So if anyone would get a call, you would think I would, and never got a call. So I do think that Judge Merchan is going to keep this case tight. He's going to keep it moving. And the jury pool has to really concern Donald Trump. That's an area up there where Trump got like 12% of the vote. That's got to scare him a lot.
Lonnie, I've known you a while and worked on various issues. In fact, we're working on the transplant justice issue with Albie Shaw now. So I know how passionate you are about people being about what is right. Tell us with Michael Cohen, who I know I've had prayer with before he went to jail, what does he represent to a jury when he's sitting there? Because here's a guy who went to jail for lying, but has been passionate about what he did and why he did it. Why do you feel, as an experienced attorney, that this would resonate with a jury?
First of all, thanks for getting that question from Reverend Sharpton, who is a preacher who knows about sinners taking ownership. And the testimony that you just showed, Michael, I happen to be sitting behind him wearing the same tie just to show you all that I'm the same person. He owned, Reverend, what he did wrong. He started out by saying that I am ashamed and I am contrite and I don't expect to be forgiven. I only expect to be heard. Nobody on national and international television can doubt that he took responsibility and did his time. But the federal prosecutors who work for Donald Trump, let me repeat this because this has been missed, Reverend, found that Donald Trump directed Michael Cohen to pay the money for which he did time. And they also found that he falsely booked, or at least the bookings were for legal expenses that he knew did not exist. And the new witness that we know this morning, a woman who was there when Donald Trump, as President of the United States, Joe Scarborough and I were on TV together on Crossfire about Bill Clinton. Well, this is a sitting President of the United States writing these illegal checks. That's the federal prosecutors called them illegal, not me, and they work for Trump. Writing checks from the Oval Office, Joe, signing his name to Michael Cohen to reimburse him, not to pay for his legal expenses. The federal prosecutor said that was false. So I quote the prosecutors working for Donald Trump who charged Michael Cohen, targeted Michael Cohen, and never said a word. They called him individual one until the media found that he was Donald Trump. So now we're going to have the truth come out under cross-examination. And remember, Michael Cohen went through brutal cross-examination in the New York Attorney General case. The judge heard that and found him to be truthful. So we know at least that during a cross-examination, he told the truth, and the judge made a verdict finding him to be truthful.
Calling this the hush money trial only tells a part of the story. It is that, of course, $130,000 to a porn star, but this is also about interfering in the 2016 election. Legal advisor to Michael Cohen, Lanny Davis, confirming for us this morning Michael Cohen will be a witness, and jury selection gets underway in that trial on Monday. Lanny, thanks for being here. And State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Ehrenberg, thank you as well.
We take care of our children, our parents, everybody. We do it all. And yet we don't ask for more. It's not built in. It didn't sit right with me. In fact, in some ways, I think women still feel like it's untoward to speak about money for them. They feel shame. Shame. Can you imagine? It doesn't make any sense, right? And now with our rights and our access to health care being ripped from us, 50 years of rights, this passion of mine, it's really a mission for all of us.
What I want to go to is explain then how somebody that is antithetical to your roots, my mother's roots, could appeal to that base of whites and blacks in the person of Donald Trump. What are we looking at here?
If they voted for Trump in 16, whatever. They voted for Trump in 20, they knew exactly what they were doing. If they vote for Donald Trump in 2024, they're knowingly voting for a fascist. They're voting for a racist. They're voting for somebody that wants to put this country 200 years in the back. And so I'm not trying to figure them out. I'm trying to figure out how we get people out who love democracy, who love freedom, who love the rights of all Americans, how to get them to the voting booth, because that's how we save our country.
Joe preaching at yesterday's annual National Action Network convention to a standing ovation. Mika, as you saw there, honored during the conference's Women's Empowerment Luncheon, along with others, including voting rights activist Stacey Abrams, Planned Parenthood founder Alexis McGill Johnson, as we mentioned, Alicia Keys as well. And that was Joe, a part of his discussion with Reverend Al about what's at stake in November and the crucial role black men and women will play at the ballot box. And Rev, I understand today President Biden will address the convention. But first, that was some conversation with Joe, huh?
Absolutely. I'm glad you showed it, because I can't describe the reaction of the crowd. You had to see it, where you could even, they were covering the cameras, they were jumping up so. And Joe was a big hit, and Mika also preached at the women's luncheon. And I thought it was important because it showed that this is not just some people on TV. They have real feelings and real identity with people across the board. So it was great to have Joe and Mika, as well as the rest, with us at National Action Network. The president will speak virally straight from the White House. He says, I don't want to do a videotape. I want to talk live to the delegates at National Action Network, and he's going to do it this afternoon, and we're looking forward to what he has to say.
You had great speakers there. Stacey Abrams, really moving. That was a moving speech and just a call to action, wasn't it?
Absolutely. She's one of the best, and she was in rare form yesterday. We had her, and I was very glad even on the first day, as we brought in people like the head of Planned Parenthood, Alexis McGill Johnson, and it goes on and on. I think that we will have had a great convention by the time we finish tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm a Knicks fan, so in 1994, we were hoping and praying we might get our first title in a long time. We're watching the Knicks play the Rockets, as I said earlier, Ewing and Olajuwon in a great series. NBC cut away from Game 5 of the 1994 NBA Finals between the Rockets and Knicks to take coverage of the O.J. Simpson Ford Bronco chase.
Not only in the CBA, but back in his days at Ohio State, he'll give up his body as he took the hard hit from Anthony Mason.
6:39 remaining in this first half. Knicks by 2.
We are looking at live pictures of Interstate 5 in Los Angeles. We believe that that white vehicle, which is being trailed by a phalanx of California Highway Patrol cars and helicopters, belongs to Al Cowlings, who disappeared with O.J. Simpson earlier today, shortly after Mr. Simpson was informed that he was going to be formally charged with the murder of his wife and the young man who was with her at the time. It is the latest bizarre development in a string of bizarre and shocking developments that have been going on all day long.
That's, of course, the voice of the great Tom Brokaw nearly 30 years ago, June of 1994. NBC continued to dip in and out of the coverage of that chase. At times showed the game and the police pursuit simultaneously in a split screen. Joining us now, Stephen Battaglio. He writes about television and the media business for the LA Times, and broadcast journalist Ed Gordon. He was the first journalist to interview O.J. Simpson after his acquittal. Good morning to you both. It's great to have you with us. Of course, we're talking about this because O.J. Simpson died yesterday from cancer at the age of 76. Steve, I'll start with you. I was just remembering my father, who was a correspondent for CBS News at the time, had just flown into LAX on a reporting trip and got word that O.J. was on a slow-speed chase. When he was in his taxi, hearing that O.J. was a couple of miles behind him, he saw all the people on the overpasses. He witnessed the spectacle. They pulled the taxi to the side. My dad points out the guy kept the meter running the whole time. And my dad watched as O.J. and this sort of comet, as he called it, with its flames of police cars behind him traveling up that highway in a truly bizarre spectacle that was the beginning of something, I think it's fair to say, in cable news and our media culture.
It was truly a where were you TV moment. If you went through the Kennedy assassination or the Challenger explosion in 1986, you can tell a story similar to what you just told. And I think it also showed that the public was really just taking control of the story. They wanted to know everything about it. At this time in 1994, the evening newscast, they had over 30 million viewers a night. Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, and Dan Rather, and they really dictated the news agenda. I think it stopped on this day because the networks, the network news was still pretty buttoned down institution at the time. This was a kind of a tawdry story that was not something that you would cover every night. Normally, you didn't see trials like that covered. But the public was so interested in all the aspects of this case, and there were places where they could see it when they wanted it. 24-hour cable news on CNN, Court TV. There was already an appetite for this type of thing. You saw it with the Menendez trial a few years before, and also the Williams Kennedy Smith rape case. This just amped that up by a multitude. Just the celebrity, race, sex. It had so many elements in it, and incredible that the public was sitting there transfixed by DNA testimony. I mean, it was almost an education in the legal system at the same time.
And a few years later, of course, it would shift from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., and Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, 24/7 as well.
And it created a new class of journalists, the legal expert, the legal commentator, and the law became something that was talked about in a pretty sophisticated degree on television after this.
Yeah, and this morning the Times was talking about how there were many tragedies here. One of the tragedies was that there were two Americas on vivid display. I was on an airplane when the verdict was announced, and everybody screamed in shock and horror, and yet that was where white America was.
Absolutely. I remember that day because it was October 3rd, my birthday. And Jesse Jackson and I had done an interview at a local station in New York. We walked outside, the verdict had come in, and a guy was driving by, a white guy with driving a truck, and said, "We'll get even with you guys." And we said, well,
"Happy birthday, Ryan! Happy birthday!"
I thought he was saying happy birthday. And what is he talking about? And the verdict was that. But no one really knew this better than Ed Gordon, who got the first interview with O.J. And Ed Gordon was and remains one of the premier black journalists in our country. And Ed talked about how a lot of black America was not necessarily for O.J., but was for Johnny Cochran and being able to show that we could make the system work our way because we didn't feel that there was enough evidence for O.J. I remember Johnny Cochran had asked me to visit O.J. in jail, and I said, this is not a civil rights issue. I wouldn't go. So we were torn between that. We were not necessarily pro-O.J., but we were for Johnny and showing that he could defeat those that were ill-prepared to prove their case.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rev, and thank you for allowing me this time to talk about something. It's hard to believe sometimes that it's been 30 years, but I think you hit the nail on the head. The idea that this was not about O.J. Simpson. People forget that O.J. had been a beloved football star, but as his time went on as a celebrity, his popularity in black America had waned, quite frankly, by the time all of this happened. And it really was about the idea of finally seeing an African-American male in particular beat a system that had beat us down for so very long. That coupled with the idea of the relationship that the LAPD had with the black community all of those years. So it was kind of a David beats Goliath for the first time moment. And I think that we have to understand that this trial was really not only about the trial, but it was about America and race. That was the personification of the division that has become so vivid that we see today. So it was one of those touchstone moments that really we can look back on and say that this spoke as much about O.J. Simpson and those murders as it did where we sit in America.
So, Stephen, let's talk specifically about the phenomenon of cameras in the courtroom. This was a day-to-day drama. Americans hooked each and every moment. The attorneys, the judge, they all became celebrities. And we're having this debate again because Donald Trump's about to go on trial. And the federal courts don't allow cameras. New York, which starts Monday, doesn't allow camera. Georgia, were that to happen, does. What do we think? Is this a good or a bad thing?
I think it depends on your perspective. Certainly from a legal perspective, I mean, let's look at the Menendez brothers. The first trial was televised. There was a mistrial. The second trial not televised. There was a conviction. You would have to think there was some sort of correlation there. So I think a lot of it has the point of view of the parties involved at this point. I will tell you that the phenomenon of cameras in the courtroom was that they provided sort of an inexpensive way to present a saga that gripped viewers, that you could see it play out in real time. And I think the demand for that type of thing among the consumer has only intensified. And if any of these trials are televised, you're going to see them streamed on multiple outlets. I mean, there were just a few places to go 30 years ago. Now it'll be everywhere. You'll have TikTok hot takes. I mean, it will be very interesting to see how this current, much more fragmented and much more unruly media environment will play a role in a similar case like this.
And Ed, we are so fragmented when it comes to media, where we get our media from generation to generation. But we were just showing a graphic at the bottom of the screen that 150 million Americans saw that white Bronco chase. Hard to believe that many Americans were in front of a television set at one time. Shows just how big of a moment that was.
Yeah, it's certainly a different day that we live in now. And if you think about the idea from the murders to the acquittal and then the thereafter in the streets, America was transfixed on this case. This was real reality television. This was not the Housewives. This is something that we really viewed in the same way that we did The Bachelor and all of these things. You got to know all of the characters. You know, if you were old enough back then, you can still recite the names. It was an extraordinary time.
Johnny Cochran was a true media superstar. People would ask for his autograph. Yeah. Dan Abrams, whose career was launched by this, he said it was like his presence was more powerful than walking down the street with like a former president or a rock star. It was just it's hard to describe.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It was.
Broadcast journalist Ed Gordon and Los Angeles Times writer Stephen Battaglia, thank you both for helping us walk through these memories of how the media landscape has changed so much in these 30 years. We appreciate it.
Is Kari Lake going to be at the Kamala Harris event? Because I know she says she's always been against this abortion law.
Well, Republican Senate candidate Kari Lake, in her trademark soft focus lighting, has contacted state lawmakers in an effort to repeal the abortion ban. That's according to a Republican legislator who told NBC News that they received a call from Lake earlier this week. On Wednesday, the GOP-controlled House shut down discussion on a proposal to overturn the law. Lawmakers will now not meet again until next Wednesday. Now, Joe, in the wake of the ruling, Lake has decidedly flip-flopped on the issue and is now trying to project a more moderate stance.
Is that like Trump flip-flopping on abortion and Obamacare?
Yeah, we have a lengthy list of Trump flip-flops just in the last week alone. Yeah. Here's what Kari Lake was saying 2 years ago when she was running for governor, followed by a video that she posted yesterday on social media.
I don't believe in abortion. I think the older law is going to go into effect. That's what I believe will happen. I don't think abortion pills should be legal.
We have a great law on the books right now. If that happens, we will be a state where we will not be taking the lives of our unborn anymore.
I'm incredibly thrilled that we are going to have a great law that's already on the books. So it will prohibit abortion in Arizona, and I think we're going to be paving the way and setting course for other states to follow.
This total ban on abortion that the Arizona Supreme Court just ruled on is out of line with where the people of this state are. The issue is less about banning abortion and more about saving babies. I agree with President Trump. This is such a personal and private issue. I chose life, but I'm not every woman. I want to make sure that every woman who finds herself pregnant has more choices so that she can make that choice that I made.
Joining us now, weekly columnist for The Washington Post, Fareed Zakaria. He's the author of the new book, Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the Present. Fareed, good morning. It's great to have you. I want to talk about the book in depth in just a moment, but let's go back to the conversation we were having a moment ago about Israel and this step now taken by the United States to send a top military commander to Tel Aviv to coordinate with the IDF to consider the possibilities and the potential for that Iranian retaliation for the strike in Damascus a couple of weeks ago. What do you see in that move from the United States, both tactically and symbolically?
I think the U.S. has been worried from the start that while it defends Israel's right to defend itself and to pursue its adversaries, the manner in which it has conducted this war has been something the Biden administration has been, frankly, opposed to from the start. They believe there should have been a more discreet, discriminating attack. They're worried about the war widening. And what happened here was, of course, it was an Israeli strike on an Iranian consulate facility in Syria that is provoking the circumstance. So what I think the Biden administration is trying to make sure is that the war doesn't spread. Obviously, that means they're very worried about Iranian retaliation, but they are worried about the way in which Israel is going about this. Look, it's crass to point this out, but it is true. Prime Minister Netanyahu has extremely low approval ratings. There is no question that were the war to end, he would face a political reckoning. Something like 75% of Israelis want him out once the war is over. So there is obviously a danger that this war goes on and that this war expands because that is in the Prime Minister's political interest. These things are awkward to say, but that is the reality.
That is the reality. And it's also it's awkward to say as well because Hamas is responsible for what happened on October 7th. And yet it was made possible in so many ways by Benjamin Netanyahu. And we've been trying to get answers from Israeli officials and others. Maybe you can provide some insight. Why didn't Netanyahu know about Hamas's funding sources in 2018 and neither he nor Donald Trump did anything about it? Why do they send the Mossad chief to Doha 3 weeks before the attacks? And actually had the Qataris saying, do you want us to still give money to Hamas? And they were like, yes, sure we do. Why is it that it took 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours for Israel to respond to the brutal raping and slaughtering of Jewish people in the worst Holocaust, worst killing of Jews since the Holocaust. You know, when 9/11 happened downtown, our first responders were there in 2 minutes. Why? Do you have any answers?
Well, look, the broader strategic problem is that Bibi Netanyahu was colluding with Hamas. It was a informal collusion, but it was a collusion which was strategic from his point of view. He wanted to kill the idea of a two-state solution. How do you kill the idea of this two-state solution? You say the Palestinians are ungovernable, they're divided, and one part of them is run by these fanatical crazies. So in order to keep that theory alive, you have to make sure that the fanatical, crazy jihadists, Hamas, are well funded.
So he funds the jihadists, and then talk about how that frees him up to actually put pressure on Palestinians on the West Bank and allow illegal settlements to continue to grow there.
Look, in the last 3 weeks, the day that Tony Blinken was in Israel, he announced an appropriation of 2,000 acres of land in the West Bank for further settlements, something that not only the United States, but almost every country in the world believes is a direct violation of international law. So, you know, that the strategy is still at some level in place. Why there was that failure on that horrible day, where the brutal massacre that Hamas did, and for which it is solely responsible and should be destroyed. I think that may have been an IDF failure, but it's fair to say that Bibi Netanyahu was not spending his time worrying about, an attack from Hamas. That was not his concern.
We've talked before about how much Dr. Brzezinski, how great respect he had for you. I went back and I know you spoke with him a good bit.
Yep.
Went back and read his memoirs about Camp David. And even then, even going back to 78, there were constant discussions, constant battles about illegal settlements. Can you explain why it's in Israel's best interest, cynically, to keep pushing these illegal settlements in the West Bank? Something that the United States, whether it's Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush or Joe Biden, why Israel keeps ignoring the United States and putting these illegal settlements in the West Bank?
I think it is not in Israel's long-term interest.
They think it is.
Right. So, I mean, to my mind, the best advocate on this issue is the founding prime minister of Israel, who was himself, you know, when it takes place, David Ben-Gurion, the man who more than any single human being probably created Israel and allowed it to survive. When the war takes place in 67, a few months later, he says, give back the territories. You're going to regret this. Trust me. And this is a man who, you know, when founding Israel, had to take a lot of land and expel a lot of Palestinians. Right.
Zionists.
This is a tough guy.
Right.
And he said, you're going to rue this. This is because you're going to be stuck with this, with this problem, which is exactly what has happened.
Right.
Because land acquired by force is something the world is not going to recognize. We don't recognize it when Putin does it. We don't recognize it when Israel does it. And therefore, the reason we have accepted the fact that Israel has these occupied lands is because it has always been, the idea has always been, there is a path here where, we're trying to work this out, where this is a temporary acquisition.
Right.
The settlements make that permanent. But to be fair, it's always important to state in these situations, there have been Israeli governments that have made real good faith efforts to deal with this issue. Ehud Barak did offer Arafat 98% of the West Bank and compensating territory. Ehud Olmert did offer Abu Mazen, Arafat's successor. The problem we have right now is that was, and this is why I think issues on campus are different. The Israel you and I remember, Joe, is an Israel that made serious offers for peace, and the Palestinians turned them down. For the last 15 years under Bibi Netanyahu, Israel has made no such offers, has been appropriating land, has been arresting people, keeps Palestinians under martial law, and has supported Hamas. So that's a very different Israel that most young people have seen in the last 15 years.
And Willie, it has been that sort of cynicism with one focus, and that is doing everything possible to avoid a two-state solution. That's what Netanyahu's been doing. And again, that's what's caused the cynicism for so many young Americans. And by the way, Willie, one more thing, too, for people that are just tuning in, I will say, when Fareed talks about those opportunities and those deals, just so people don't say, oh, my God, he's so pro-Israel. I've heard Fareed say time and again, talking about 2000, which is, of course, when I brought it up with Dr. Brzezinski, that's when he called me stunningly superficial. Yes. As Fareed has said, he's used that quote that we've heard diplomats say before, the Palestinians have never passed up an opportunity to pass up an opportunity. So, this is both two sides looking past each other.
And by the way, you can still get your stunningly superficial merch online at MorningJoe.com.
You can still get the mug,
sweatshirts,
T-shirt,
coffee mugs,
yes,
golf visor for the Masters. Make it a whole package.
Exactly.
Fareed, also want to ask you before we get to the book about Ukraine and the aid that is so desperately needed by that country right now, that has been held up for months now without really any sense of urgency by the House, particularly Republicans in the House. What is your sense of how that delay is being felt on the front lines and impacting Ukraine's ability to push back Russia, as it has for more than 2 years now?
Well, it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of the word of the United States, a commitment that the United States government, bipartisan, has been making for years now to support Ukraine, and is now pulling the rug from under them at an absolutely critical moment. It rewards the worst kind of aggression. It rewards the most anti-American dictator with the greatest power in the world. It's extraordinary that the party of Ronald Reagan is holding up aid to a group of people who are desperately fighting to become more pro-Western, more pro-American, more part of the Western and the American world. I mean, Ronald Reagan called the Afghan Mujahideen the moral equivalent of the Founding Fathers. If they were the moral equivalents of the Founding Fathers, the Ukrainians whom I have seen fighting for their freedom are some exponential version of that. These are really the good guys. I mean, they have taken incredible losses. They are up against a Russian aggressor. Marjorie Taylor Greene has some bizarre argument that we should be supporting Russia because they're Christians. But the Ukrainians, first of all, are Christians too. They are fighting for a liberal democracy, not a religious state. But the Russians have destroyed 100 Ukrainian churches because they bomb absolutely indiscriminately. In fact, it's not really indiscriminate. They are targeting civilian facilities, religious facilities, water treatment plants. This is one of the most brutal campaigns an aggressor has ever waged. And he might win because the United States is dawdling over something like this. I mean,
because House Republicans are dawdling.
Because House Republicans are, and to be fair, again, it's not even House Republicans. Right. A majority of House Republicans would vote for this. It's because you have this, this minority that is really trying to build a profile on social media, and not really, this is part of what the problem with American politics is right now. With a 1 or 2 seat majority, the Republican Party is behaving as though it has a 2/3 majority and is being governed by the most extreme 10% of the party.
Joe, Morning Joe conversation kind of continued a few blocks away in New York with you and Rev yesterday.
I'll tell you what, Rev, you had quite an event there yesterday, and you, of course, always the convener and the star of the show, but Mika Brzezinski was given an award. It was very moving. The whole entire thing was so moving.
No, Mika was awarded by the women of National Action Network And it was very moving. Hundreds of women thanking her for raising on a global level their value. And she was moved. I think she underestimated the kind of emotion they had. Yeah. And then I think you underestimated your impact among this kind of community. We had a couple of thousand people in the room and had a fireside chat and talked about how our relationship evolved. And the way people cheered, I mean, I thought you were running for president or something.
No.
I've had presidents. In fact, the president's going to do a viral speech this afternoon at our conference. And I've had presidents there. They didn't get a better reception than you got yesterday. People need to really look online and see how they treated Joe Scarborough. I was a little jealous, to be honest.
I was not jealous at all. Not jealous at all. It was... You know, what I've heard about National Action Network through the years, and I tell you, Phil has told me about it for some time, how closely he's worked with it, is that you're always there. The organization's always there for the people who need it the most. I mean, most people don't know that, but when you get off of this show, you know, you get on the phones and you're calling around and asking people what they need for help. How you can help an individual who's in trouble right now. Of course, these things that get on national news, these tragedies of young black men usually, but sometimes young white men, sometimes young Hispanic men, people see that, but they don't see everything that goes on day in and day out. You helping people with their rent, you just, again, helping when people need something.
Well, you can't, in my opinion, use victims as props. They are victims, but once the cameras are gone, you need to still be there. That's why we built an organization, not just me out there. And we've been able to do that. But also, as history, Joy Reid was there with her book on Medgar Evers later yesterday afternoon, and she was received well. Medgar Evers' assassination was what helped galvanize the March on Washington in 1963. Right. And I can go on and show where these tragedies become the turning point for changing social policy if you use it right. So my feeling is you must protect the families, the victims, but you also must change the policies and the laws so you don't continue to have these victims. You must do both. You can't just drop them and just go for whatever else you see as the next item.
Yeah, exactly. I turn that tragedy into promise. And, of course, again, the President of the United States is going to be speaking at National Action Network today.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.